Hi, everyone. I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding and digital skills bootcamp for them. You can use the Course Report website to research the best coding and technical skills bootcamps all over the world, as well as insights on which programming languages and tools to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your very own bootcamp experience. Today, I'm speaking with Zubair Desai from Reactor by Galvanize about how you'll use generative AI in a coding bootcamp. Zubair has an extensive background in software engineering and is now a curriculum and instruction manager at Reactor by Galvanize. Zubair, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'd really love to kick off this Q&A first with how you actually got into software engineering.
Well, first of all, Jess, thanks for letting me here, and it's great to be having the opportunity to talk to everybody about the subject. I think it's really important and really relevant for this time. So yeah, my journey into software engineering, is kind of twisty-turny. I didn't go straight into the traditional computer science and then become a software engineer route. That said, I was really privileged as a child to have access to one of the early computers back in the day when there was no mouse, it was just a keyboard, and it was no graphical user interface or anything like that. You had to type in commands, and it was just two colors. I didn't have a lot of resources back then, so couldn't afford to buy software or anything like that. But I did have an old programming book. And actually, I still have that book with me today from my childhood. And I learned how to code. It was magical for me. I had a lot of opportunity to kind of practice coding, doing that as a child. Where other kids were playing like Oregon Trail in computer lab, I had the chance to write code. I kind of it always had a special place in my heart. And so, fast forward to college, I thought I knew what I wanted to do. I was going to major in computer science. But then at the time, interestingly enough, much like today's climate, there was a lot of fear and concern around jobs not existing for software engineers. And so everything
Wow.
was
Yeah.
outsourced. Did you remember that? Like everything was getting outsourced. And so I actually was kind of talked out of it. It was, I wanted to do computer science, and everyone was like, well, that's not going to exist in a couple of years. Those jobs are all going away and they won't exist for you. So I pivoted and I kind of hedged my bet. So I majored in computer information systems and business. And so, I graduated and had, went into the industry and was fortunate to have a good job and broaden my horizons. But it always stuck with me that I really wish that I went into software engineering purely. So about 15 years ago, I decided to make the change. I went into software engineering. I said, it should have just followed my passion to begin with. Although I didn't have any regrets, it did broaden my technical horizon. And I actually joined the first Galvanized Bootcamp in San Francisco when they did their first launch. So I already knew how to code, but I chose this bootcamp in particular because I found it to be, I looked at the curriculum, they were very agile focused. It was a very modern engineering stack. They had really good partnerships with companies in the area. And I always felt like, even though I know how to code, if I join this boot camp, I can be a part of the network. I can really be part of the industry. I can learn the modern coding practices. And I can really build upon my existing knowledge and skill as opposed to being held back in any way. So I went ahead and I moved to San Francisco and did that. It was a lot of fun. And my only regret is not going to software engineering sooner, and not giving into all the fears and concerns around the climate then. And actually, we're kind of in that same space now with AI and all of that, which is kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a good segue to this next question I had, which when we're talking about Gen AI and Gen AI at Reactor, is Gen AI a replacement for learning how to code at this point?
Mhm. Yeah. It's far from it. Even looking back again at the outsourcing days, we couldn't replace software engineers with other humans, right? Like there's just an unquenchable thirst for software. And anytime the economy is growing and companies are scaling, and they're trying to be more productive, the first place they look for is software. And the next thing that they need is software engineers. And what we found over the years is that the world just doesn't have enough software. And there doesn't seem to be a limit for the amount of software that we need. And so what it comes down to is, okay, you've got AI, you're a software engineer. How much more, how much more coding can you do now? And so really the expectation has gone up. But the idea of it replacing software engineers, it's just a far cry from that. And in fact, the nice thing about AI is it actually makes a lot of the tedious aspects of software engineering go away. And so you get to work on more interesting problems. It does actually make it easier for you to get into it in some ways, although it makes it more challenging in other ways.
Yeah, and we're about, I'd say, like 2 years or so since this rise of generative AI tools like Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and ChatGPT, and so many others. At this point, how are software engineers using these Gen AI tools on the job?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. So, if we're just thinking about tooling for generative AI, where you'll see it primarily being used is in tools like GitHub Copilot. So, software engineers, a lot of places just have it built into their workflow. So, they have access to a tool like GitHub Copilot. It will be available to them in their editor where they'll be writing code. And right in that area where they're writing code can make some suggestions for them, or kind of help them just write things a lot faster. Normally, they just have to type out, it'll just kind of auto-complete that for them. And it both, it's a double-edged sword, so you have to be careful with it. It can auto-complete things, and sometimes when it works, it's great, and oftentimes it'll kind of have something that's just not quite there. So that's where having the solid foundational experience and skill as a software engineer comes into play, where you can take this technology and really use it to help you be productive, but also know when it's going to be causing a major issue. And so that lets you use it with a lot of confidence. And then the other thing is, I've heard of certain software engineers, and I've heard of certain co-founders talking about using generative AI to help them kind of architect and design larger systems. And I think that's a little bit less of a popular approach because it does tend to have some issues there. But I think it has the potential to kind of get better over time as technology improves a little bit. So yeah, there's two big use cases there for the tools itself. And then the other really cool thing about generative AI in the software engineering space is, if you're a software engineer, you tend to always get the benefit of the latest technologies. So anytime there's like a breakthrough in a new technology, the first thing that companies do, like OpenAI, right? The first thing they did was let's create an API so that all the software engineers can go ahead and take advantage of this really cool tool and build software with it, innovate, create, new products and new apps. And I think that's a really big thing that's overlooked in this whole generative AI space is that, yeah, it does, help us, and then we do use it in our coding. But then at the same time, we can also use this tool to create new apps and new ideas, and build new products. And that's a big one too.
I feel like we talk a lot about like the pros and cons of AI at this point, but let's talk more about like the do's and don'ts. So,
Mhm.
what are you kind of sharing with your students, like the do's and don'ts of using Gen AI
Yeah.
as a software engineer?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the just like the high level on that, real quick for that, if you're a student and you're trying to learn how to become a coder, um, don't think that generative AI is going to totally make that, make the struggle of having to learn these new concepts and get fluency go away. You can use generative AI, and this is one of the do's, use it as your own personal tutor, right? So you can use it as someone that's just available 24/7, never gets tired, and has unlimited energy, can always answer your questions and kind of help explain things to you in different ways, and kind of meet you at your level wherever you need to be. And, I find that a lot of students find it helpful to be able to interface with that, especially if they're a little shy or they just kind of have trouble formulating their question. They can use it to help them do that. But on the don'ts category, it's not going to replace an instructor, and it's not going to replace the learning that you have to do. So, if when you're in the classroom, we expect you to be interacting with the instructor, asking lots of good questions. Really, the instructors are still going to be hands-on as much as they would, pre-AI. It's not going to replace collaboration. So don't use it to think that, if I have to, if I'm working and pair programming with someone, the first thing I'm going to do is go ask ChatGPT, like, how should I do this? It's like, that's actually going to really make it hard for you when you're trying to really learn and internalize the concepts. So take a moment to turn off generative AI in those moments and be present with your partner and the person that you're pair programming with. Or if you're building on your own, take some time to actually understand things first before you dive into using generative AI. Participate in classroom discussions. We have a lot of classroom discussions. We have a lot of back and forth. We have things like analogy time where students come up with analogies for certain concepts. Don't use ChatGPT for that. Really push yourself to think about those concepts deeply. But where you do want to really take advantage is in places where you're now focused on, I'm going to just read through this thing and self-study these concepts. And as you're going through that, by all means, use ChatGPT to help you clarify certain things. Maybe help ChatGPT um, keep you honest. You could say like, hey, here's this concept, here's what I'm learning. Ask me some questions about this concept to validate my knowledge. I'm going to give you an explanation. Tell me if that sounds right to you. So use it when you're doing that kind of self-studying. That's where it's really powerful. But it's absolutely not a replacement for classroom discussion, participation, doing your lab. Obviously, anything that is assessment like, you don't want to use it. If you're going to demonstrate your knowledge, you don't pay someone to go to the gym for you. You wouldn't use ChatGPT to answer exercise questions for you either. And then, the other thing that's really important to keep in mind too is that the more that you engage with the instructor and the instructional staff, it's going to benefit you, because one thing that our instructors are really good at, not only are they expert software engineers, but also as professional educators, they will know where your struggles are. They'll know which areas you need to improve and what you can do to get better at those things. They kind of have that benefit of being able to look at where you're at from an outside perspective and kind of steer you in the right direction. And you just can't get that with a chat GPT or a large language model. So take advantage of all the things and do it the right way, and you'll get the most benefit out of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's an excellent list that you shared. And with that in mind, how is Hack Reactor teaching coding bootcamp students to use these kinds of Gen AI tools like GitHub Copilot? Like, are students being encouraged to use it for group work or homework or portfolio projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, things like ChatGPT, other large language models that you may have a preference for, we don't want students to shy away from it. We just want them to use it the right way. And certainly, when you're doing homework, it's a great resource and tool to use when you're trying to validate your knowledge and you're trying to study and just help you memorize things and get in the groove of understanding concepts. When it comes to any place where you're trying to demonstrate knowledge, that's where we would say you don't want to use any kind of LLM or ChatGPT. That needs to come from you. You need to demonstrate that knowledge. Areas where you want to gain fluency, for example. There's just some things that you just have to do and you have to practice over and over to get better at it, get the hang of it. Those areas, obviously, we don't want you to use ChatGPT. Places where we want participation and discussion, we don't want you to use ChatGPT. Obviously, when you have to do mock interview job practice, which is something that we do towards the end of the program, we at the end of the day, look, what matters is we're helping you get a job, right? And so part of that is making sure that you actually can demonstrate your knowledge, that you've got programming fluency, you have the foundational knowledge of being a solid software engineer, and that you can do well in those job interviews, right? And so we have mock interviews. You can't use it for those kinds of things. Um, Finally, we have towards the latter weeks of the program, an area where we kind of try to simulate the workplace as much as possible. So that transition from student to software engineer in the workplace is kind of seamless, and it helps you kind of really prepare for that environment. And part of that involves using GitHub Copilot. And the reason why we introduced GitHub Copilot at that stage is because it does resemble the modern workflow. You're going to go into software engineering. This is the tool that you're going to be using. So now is the time. You've gotten the foundations. You're a solid software engineer at that point in the program. You know how to create full stack web applications. So now here's this tool that you can now use responsibly. And so what we do is we have a Copilot unit that we show students how to get set up. We provide them with Copilot seats, which they come at a monthly cost, and we give students a seat for GitHub Copilot. And then we actually do a really interesting exercise. We have them work in a unfamiliar code base where they haven't seen anything like it before. And they have to use Copilot and really leverage and lean on Copilot as much as possible to answer their questions to complete a feature that relies on them to think about things at a really high level and think about the principles of software engineering and the underlying foundations so that they can kind of see the larger picture and then hone in on, okay, this is how I need to write. This is the code I need to write to make this work. So it's a really interesting exercise and really has them kind of forces them to push Copilot to its limits and also lean on their deep software engineering knowledge as much as possible. And then at the same time, show them some of the drawbacks and pitfalls of using generative AI so that they can be really productive with it.
And will students from all of Hack Reactor's classes or cohorts use these kinds of Gen AI tools, such as the beginner cohorts? Will they also be using this?
Yes, absolutely. So, the wonderful thing about both of those programs is the ending outcome is we want you to get those software engineering jobs, right? And by the time you graduate from either one, it's a different path. It's a little bit of a different journey, but the end goal is the same. And so at a certain point in the 12-week program, maybe earlier than in the other program, you're going to get access to Copilot. It is a shorter program. But in the beginner program, in the later weeks, at that point, when you get to that place where we've determined you are now a full stack software engineer, that's when you'll get access to Copilot. So it's different points in the program, but both programs will get that.
And then I'd love some real life examples of how Hack Reactor students have used Gen AI tools like either ChatGPT or Copilot in the past year, because I believe Hack Reactor added the Copilot unit maybe a year ago. So I'd love to hear some examples there.
First of all, now that everyone is using it in the latter weeks, they're all using it in their projects to a certain degree. Some of the interesting stories that I've heard is students using ChatGPT to help them with interview practice. And I think that's great. So a lot of students will use that generally. We'll do actual mock interviews with students as well. And we'll have kind of a series of questions and really be very rigorous about that process. What we've found is that the students that take advantage of using ChatGPT, it just helps them kind of get into the mindset, get into the mode, be more conscious about how they're answering the questions. And they'll get a little bit of feedback from ChatGPT. It'll call them out if they're not giving specific examples of things like that, which I think is awesome. So then when they go into the mock interviews that we perform with them, they're coming in already prepared and ready to go. So we kind of see an improvement there. And so I think that's a great example. And so a lot of students now really take advantage of it for that purpose. And then we also see that, interestingly enough, because you are now, at a certain point in the program, you become a software engineer, you now have the ability to tap into APIs. And so you can use APIs that, give you the weather, or, tell you the latest in greatest in, like, soup recipes, right? But then that also includes APIs like OpenAI's ChatGPT. You can access that. And so what we're seeing is that students are also incorporating that into their projects. So they're creating applications that use generative AI, where you can send out information or a question or a prompt, and then you'll get a response back from OpenAI's API, and you integrate that into your application. You can even do some prompt engineering there as well. So we see that as well, where they'll do some special prompts. Say you're going to pretend that you are, you're going to pretend that you're this kind of actor, and you're going to respond in this way, and then their application can respond in that kind of way. So some really interesting, cool things that they can do there. There's a lot of power behind that. And again, there's a lot of excitement around what you can do with this tool.
So cool. And Zubair, do you think that understanding how to use tools like ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot as a new software engineer really improves Hack Reactor graduates' hireability?
Yeah, I think that I would say that now that AI is out there and everyone's using it in the industry, it's kind of assumed that you will be able to be competent in using AI and in using Copilot and using these things correctly. Um, back in the day, part of being a software engineer was having strong, solid foundations as a software engineer, understanding, the basics of computer science, data structures and algorithms, and then also understanding, the different systems that you're working on and the programming language, and having a good, in-depth knowledge of the programming language that you're working in. And then on top of that, having really good Google skills, right? Being able to do some research, being able to read through documentation. And so now what we're seeing is that in addition to all of that, you add on your ability to interact with and use AI. And so I think that for me and in the industry in general, it's just we've adopted it so fast in an industry, that it's just one of those things that you have to have that. So that's why, one of the things that I love about my job and my role in making sure that students are set up for success and that the content and curriculum aligns with our outcomes. When I talk to CEOs and when I talk to CTOs, I talk to principal software engineers, and I really try to understand, what is it that you're looking for in a software engineer and what's going to make your engineering team be successful. That's what gives me a sense of, where we should be. And at this moment in time, it is being confident with, of course, all the foundational knowledge of becoming a software engineer, but also being able to use AI responsibly, being able to use Copilot effectively. And those are the things that they're looking for. And so, I mean, that's what always keeps us on ahead of the curve, is just making sure that we're always aligned with what is going to be beneficial for the industry and what people are looking for to be productive. And we want our graduates to have those skills, right? So they can go in, not just get the job, but also thrive. Because when that happens, then they go back and they go, hey, let's look at all the alumni, and we're hiring. And we see this every day. We have senior engineers now that have graduated from our program, and now they're hiring, and they know that this is a solid program. They know that those engineers are going to come in strong. And so it's beneficial for us to make sure that we have all of that lined up.
And as these tools and generative AI keeps evolving, how is Hack Reactor keeping the curriculum up to date?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So really, I mean, the the curriculum is in constant iteration. It's never really just a static entity. We're always iterating. Every version is always an improvement from the previous versions. There are some key things that are really interesting about AI. So historically, before AI, it's always like, what's the new technology that we also want to integrate into our foundational side of the program? So, when you're becoming a software engineer, there's some things that you just have to know, no matter what. You have to know variables, you have to know data structures and algorithms. You have to understand the foundations of any programming language, and then you add on the additional technologies. Well, when it comes to AI, interestingly enough, it's not just something that you learn as a foundational thing or an additional technology, but it helps you in all of those aspects, right? So it's twofold. It's how to really integrate AI into your workflow as a software engineer. And it's also then how to use AI effectively as a learner. So that's really important. And so we think if we follow that, then we really get the benefit of this new technology. But back to your question, I think I kind of went off track on that question, but like to keeping the curriculum relevant is a matter of just ongoing iteration, of meeting with not only internal stakeholders and students, and understanding, what are the places where they feel there could be improvement in the curriculum, but then also importantly meeting with people who are ultimately going to be hiring our students and understanding what is it that they're looking for, what are they noticing in the team, are they seeing any shift in dynamics or technologies, where do they feel like there could be a better workflow, or a place where people can come in better prepared. So that's really important to us. And I think that's what helps us build a lot of trust with the people that we partner with and the people that we talk to, because they know that that's the thing that we're always going to be looking out for, because ultimately that's what helps the students. And that's the thing that we really ultimately care about, is making sure that they're successful. And if the hiring partners and people who are employing the students are happy, and the students will be happy as well, and everyone's happy. So, that's how we work backwards from what is it that the workplace wants, what are people looking for, and then we just keep making sure that the curriculum is aligned with that.
And there are a lot of free resources out there now, or short courses on Gen AI. What do you think the benefits are of doing an immersive coding bootcamp like Hack Reactor that includes Gen AI in the curriculum versus more of like a self-studying approach with these kinds of resources?
So I think that actually those self-studying free resources are actually, like, I think it's awesome that people offer those things for free. I love free resources. I love me some free reads. I will always start with that. I think it's important for people to explore, right, and see what is working for them. And, when you start to get into something, whether it's a new trade or a new craft, right? Software engineering, start with the free stuff, right? Go to a library, borrow some books, go online, look at some generative AI courses, or, anything that might be helpful. And if it's something that you like and you start to realize, like, hey, this is pretty cool, I'm enjoying this, I'm learning a lot, I can see myself doing this. When you're ready to get serious, then you need to start looking at a place that is going to resemble the workplace environment, right? Like, if this is something where you want to do this professionally, and this is going to be your career, then I think it starts to make sense to join an immersive program. And the big thing about Hack Reactor, in both of the beginner program and the intermediate program, the main thing is, before you graduate, the last few weeks is going to be much closer to a workplace simulator, right? So start to finish, you're really going into this environment where you're collaborating, you're communicating, you're working with others, right? That's part of the benefit of an immersive. At Hack Reactor, we go through great pains to make sure that students pair program, that students articulate and break down complex ideas and problems in a way that other people can understand, that their code is readable by other people, and that they're getting code under review by our software engineer instructors as well. And so they're going into an environment where by the time they graduate, they're already in this mindset of what it's like to be a software engineer in the workplace. And so we're minimizing that friction from going to not having a software engineer job to having a software engineer job. And by starting into an immersive program, your path is going to be accelerated, and it's going to be a much more seamless transition, right? And you're also going to get that mock interview practice and that networking, and of course the coaching involved with it. Everyone comes in at different points in their journey with different strengths and weaknesses, and we've really seen it all, right? So for the instructor to come in and see, okay, this is where your struggle points are, and this is where your strengths are, we can kind of make sure that we coach you through it so that you can really get into your end goal, which it would be to get a software engineering job. So if you're really serious about it, you really want to do something where you have that much support, right? It takes a village to make these world-class programs work.
And that's an excellent place to wrap up this deep dive into Gen AI for boot campers. Thanks so much for talking with us today, Zubair. We will be posting a recording and a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for Hack Reactor by Galvanize, in case you're interested in applying for any of their upcoming cohorts. And thanks so much to all of you for watching. Tweet at us, email us, and let us know which topic you'd like us to cover next on the Course Report blog. And in the meantime, you can follow Course Report on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you're a Bootcamp alum, don't forget to post a review of your Bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone who's thinking of getting into tech today.